Welcome to Broadcast Advocate, the official podcast of the National Alliance of State Broadcasting Associations. I'm your host, Allison Mazzei, president of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters. My co-host is Jordan Walton, president of the Massachusetts and New Jersey Broadcast Associations. And today we're diving into one of the most important issues facing local media today, the fight to keep AM radio in vehicles. For decades, AM radio has delivered vital news, weather, and emergency alerts, and culturally resonant programming to millions of Americans, whether they're in big cities, rural towns, or somewhere in between. But now, as some automakers move to eliminate AM receivers in new electric vehicles, especially, there's growing concern about what's at stake. To help us unpack this issue, we're joined by two national leaders whose organizations represent broadcasters at the heart of this conversation.
First up, we'll speak with Jim Winston. Jim, can you just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters and your members and what they represent?
Sure. Pleasure being with you today. Thank you for inviting me. I am Jim Winston. I'm the president of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters, commonly known as NABOB. NABOB was founded in 1976. Members actually came together at an NAB convention, and they started talking and realized they had some unique problems that were not being addressed by NAB because it's obviously a much bigger organization. And the problem they found was that advertisers did not see the value of advertising to stations that were serving the African American community. And there were two reasons for that. One, lack of understanding of the community and why it was a valuable business asset. And two, the small number of stations that existed. There were only at that time there were about 10,000 radio stations in the country, and only about 35 of them were owned by African Americans. And they were, of course, scattered all over the country. So each of them was living sort of much a lone existence in their markets. And so they decided they combine their resources, they could have a better voice in the advertising industry. As I said, that was 1976. And NABOB continued, well, at the time, as I said, there were about 35 radio stations, no television stations owned by African Americans. And now here we are in 2025. We've got about 220 radio stations out of now 11,000 radio stations in the country. So we're still a pretty small segment of the ownership pie. And we've got about 25 TV stations that are owned by African Americans out of, I think there are like 1,100 full power radio television stations. So we're still a fairly small fraction of the industry, but what we find is that our members survive primarily because they are the trusted voices in our community. People look to us for important information, and that's why we continue to be successful and relevant today.
Small but mighty, Jim. Small but mighty. Also with us is Jeff Nalley. Jeff is with the Cromwell Ag Network and serves as the current president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasters. Jeff, welcome. Let us know a little bit about you and your organization.
Well, the first I should say is we talk about the National Association of Broadcasting. I work for a wonderful fella out of Nashville, Tennessee, named Bud Walters, who has served with NAB for a number of years. Bud and I came together a little over 20 years ago when we started this Cromwell Ag Radio Network. Consists of some of the properties that he owns, but also various affiliates across a number of states. The National Association of Farm Broadcasting was established back in the mid-40s. We've been in business for over 80 years. And Jim, I think you could agree that if we look back at the beginning of radio, it was about to serve the needs of communities. Yes, there were newspapers. Yes, there were publications. They even had telephones in that day, but we discovered that terrestrial radio had a way of providing information that people needed. It also provided entertainment. During that period of time, the majority of people in the country were farmers. And as the FCC was looking at expanding and granting licenses, one of the things that helped stations be able to get a license was that they said they were going to help the agriculture community. And of course, at that period of time, the country was facing a challenge of producing enough food and fiber for itself. We had land grant universities that were working hard. So farm broadcasters began to find their way into radio, providing news and information to help farmers do a better job. It was a common link. As radio expanded, you saw less and less interest in perhaps serving the needs and more about entertainment. Past Amos and Andy and some of the other things that we had, the Green Lantern and some of those talk shows that were so popular. But farm radio was a part of radio and helping it expand from the very beginning. We continue to try to meet the needs of the agriculture community. Our theme in our past convention in November of 24 was a voice for agriculture. In the beginning, we might have been that voice for, which means serving the needs of the producer, the farmer, and the rancher in the country. But now we find ourselves in a position of speaking on behalf of agriculture, helping to explain environmental issues, where food comes from, and the science behind the role that helps to make food abundant and affordable here in the U.S. Our goal is to continue to have the ability with terrestrial radio to serve the needs of the agriculture producer in the country. There are so many areas of the nation where broadband is not available. So whether it's weather emergency or whether it's the reason that commodity prices are moving the way they are, in some cases, the radio is the only way that these people of the soil are able to stay in touch with this news. And we desperately want to be a part of serving the food and fiber chain of the country. And radio is the way that we survive. You know, we've come through the TV age and we embraced it. There was the satellite information that came to farmers with their own units in their offices. We survived that too. And in the digital arena, radio, with our most recent research, shows that it is the dominant form of information, and the broadcaster is a trusted servant for the community. They're still listening and paying attention on the digital format, but radio is their primary, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Thank you so much, Jim and Jeff. It's very helpful to have that background about each of your organizations. And Jeff, you talked about that although radio has been around for decades, how it's still relevant, considering especially that broadband is not available everywhere, showing its relevancy. So, Jim, what are some ways that radio, even though it's considered more of a legacy medium, is still really critical and matters to the communities that you serve?
You know, let me say the very first thing that we want to point out is that radio's free. You know, you've got to have all the digital, whatever form it's coming in, you've got to be paying for it. So that's a distinction in and of itself. In addition, in the digital world, there are millions of publishers. Anybody with a computer can put something online and say, I say X. And what we know is that leads to a great deal of misinformation online that people have to sort through and figure out what's true, what's honest. And what are you going to do to get the answer to that question? You're going to go to a trusted source. And for our listeners, that's radio. That they know when they turn on the radio station, that voice that they've been listening to for 10, 20, or 30 years is the trusted voice, and they're going to trust that voice to tell them what's actually going on. So I think that, you know, that's a very important role that we play in radio. That is one of the reasons why we're so successful today, in spite of all of these millions of other sources of content that are out there.
Jeff, how about you? Do you have anything to add to that? Why is radio still, the choice for agricultural communities?
Well, let's look for this, and again, I'm going to compliment Bud Walters, my boss, not because I'm bucking for a raise, but he believes in that public file and that the service of radio for the community is primary. So let's fast forward to the events that we saw in the Carolinas with the hurricane this last time. cell phone towers were out. You couldn't get publications. The only information that people had was coming over terrestrial radio. We had an experience in my hometown in Owensboro, Kentucky a few years ago. We got 2 inches of ice. 2 inches of ice. It took down cell phone towers. It took down power lines. We had thousands of telephone poles down, and the only way that people could get information was radio. We tied all 7 of our sticks together, and we moved past entertainment and the point of telling people where they could find food and where they could find fuel and providing this means. This is an agriculture today changing topics that trades the value of commodities nearly 24 hours a day. We're no longer subject to the news that happens between 9 and 1 each day when the Board of Trade used to be open. We are trading news around the world and around the clock. And just a few cents of a movement in a market makes a difference. What happens if we find a foreign animal disease that strikes in this nation? People are going to need information on the farm, and consumers are going to need information to protect us all. Not to saying that those foreign animal disease will be a danger to humans, but it's going to affect the food supply. It's going to affect transportation. It's going to affect other areas. When severe weather comes, where is their source of information when you pick up your phone and say, "Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?" It's a trusted voice, and it's a dependent voice on serving its community. And we've got a heritage of doing that, Jim.
Right.
Well, Jeff, you brought up the ice storm in your area, and the momentum behind AM radio advocacy over the last couple of years has really centered on the emergency alert system and
Exactly.
EAS and how AM acts as the backbone of that system. So, can you talk about a little bit for your members how AM radio specifically works in your world when it comes to tornadoes or floods or fire danger?
Well, when you think about it, if you're sitting at home and watching the TV, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. We support our broadcast members that are on towers that are being delivered digitally. But what happens when digital goes out? I found myself doing severe weather coverage a few years ago, and at that time I worked with a station that had a very broad signal. And I had a friend of mine said I was coming up the interstate, and you told me that just in front of me there was tornadic activity. I pulled over under an underpass, and because I heard that voice, it protected me from being in harm's way. I respect the fact that in the metro areas where broadband is strong, that digital may be more reliable. But we have seen in times gone past, whether sunspots or whether too heavy of rain for your satellite dish to come in, or your digital signal is down, or pray tell that internet goes out. Where are you then? And does that mean that our lives are dependent on digital, and if it fails, then we're not worried about human life anymore? I mean, initially, radio was meant for civil defense. The first radio station I worked with, the basement had all of the civil defense operations that if our nation had come under attack, we were the people that were going to be on the job and serving the needs of individuals. Are we past that today, and that's no longer a concern? And then if we suggest that we are still concerned, is it only about people in their homes? Are we just going to write off the millions of people that are in their cars at that time? I mean, you have a system that works. You have radio stations that, in order to maintain their license, we have to have an EAS system in line that the government can take control. And now you're saying this group of people, because they're in a vehicle, we're no longer worried about you. But if you want that information, it'll become digital dependent, and you'll have to pay a subscription for it. We're from Washington. We're here to help you. Really?
So, Jim, after an emergency, listeners tune into radio stations that they trust for news in times of crisis. Can you share what's at risk if those voices are lost inside of a car dashboard?
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about who's listening to AM radio, because I think there's a narrow view of what's on AM radio and who's listening to it. My members, and as I said, we're a fairly small part of the total radio industry, but I have AM members who have old R&B oldies, who have other members who have gospel, other members who are doing news talk, others who are even and we're not supposed AM not supposed to be a music a venue anymore. It's supposed to be FM. We have members who are doing music, who are doing hip hop, who are doing R&B on AM radio, because if you're the only station in town, in a small town, you're delivering whatever the population there wants. So and because of that, it's a critical place to go to make sure that when that small group that's unique to that particular format, they've got to be included in when there's information that needs to be provided to the public. So Jeff was talking about emergency situations, and it's got to be somewhere that everybody is. So radio is going to hit you with whatever your unique tastes are, no matter how small that group of listeners is. Radio is going to be there to serve you in time of emergency to hit that group, and that's what I think people understand, that there are various different groups. Everybody's not sitting in front of the TV. You've got general market programming there, but there's a large part of the world that's listening to niche programming on radio that needs to be reached in times of need.
Hey, Jordan, let me throw this to you as well, and I'll kick this out from a friend of mine, Brian Winnicus, who's one of our broadcasters up in Wisconsin. If you're a parent or a grandparent, is there anything sweeter than the sound of your child's name? Who else covers local sports? Who else goes to the county fair? Who goes to the local fiscal court meeting? Who addresses those local issues that need attention? This is about a quality of life. We understand the big mega station. I get it. We work by the quarter hour there. We play the songs that people want to hear. But from the AM radio's perspective, just what Jim is suggesting, there are niches in our community that want to hear these things. Is it award-winning radio? Probably not all the time, but it's our radio, and it's our people, and it's our community. And these are the things that go away when you disseminate from this particular area. AM radio's golden. Golden.
I think you're exactly right, Jeff, especially given that so many sources of local information and journalism are gone, given what's happened to the print industry, and local radio is that last remaining voice of the community covering those events that are important to the people who live there. So that's an excellent point. Even beyond the public service angle, there's clearly an economic one. I would say many, if not most of your members are probably independently owned stations. So from the business perspective, what would it mean to their bottom line if AM radio was removed from the dashboard? I'll throw that to Jim first.
Okay, fine. Needless to say, radio has always survived by drive time, AM drive time, afternoon drive time. That's the bread and butter for radio. So if you've got cars that are not able to receive AM radio, that obviously cuts into your audience significantly. Now, the good news thus far, ironically, is that electric vehicles haven't taken off the way some anticipated. So we still got time to fix this problem. We've still got time for the electric vehicle people to maintain AM in their dashboards. But it is critical for any AM radio station to be available during drive time for its audience.
Jim, I'll add on to that, and a caveat to the other. We also have found instances where an electric vehicle is transmitting a signal that they may not have AM radio, but they may prevent the car closest by from receiving that AM signal. We also know some electric co-ops and utility companies are using wireless devices that also may infringe on some of these frequencies that I don't think the FCC is policing closely. So if you have a business in town, let's say you're a small mom and pop, and you would really like to buy ads on the local FM flamethrower station, or you'd like to buy ads in the newspaper, but your budget, you just can't afford it. Well, here's an opportunity with AM radio that for 2, 5, 10, $12 a spot, you can get your message out to the people that you want to reach that helps your business grow. And then maybe someday you can afford those larger means or television ads. Local radio and AM radio as a way to support that local business. Now, I don't know many, Jim, I don't know many AM radio station operators that are driving Bugattis or Lamborghinis, so I don't think they're getting rich either. But they are public servants and
Yeah.
and they're helping the community grow.
And what you find primarily in small communities in particular is station owners, AM station owners who are just who just barely gotten into the business. Because as we know, AM is going to be your lower price entry into the radio industry, and so you find people who have AM stations, standing on AM stations in small markets or even medium-sized markets, where they got in solely because they wanted to serve the community. I have members all the time talking to me about the kinds of things they're doing in their local community that are unique to what they're doing. As you said, Jeff talking, covering high school sports and community gatherings and church events and things like that are geared to serving the community as opposed to being there for the primary purpose of making money.
Allison, I would also suggest that what we're seeing now with the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, yes, there is a digital audience out there that wants information on demand, but the bigger audience is still over terrestrial radio. So we have the opportunity to come on and tell the headline and tell a portion of the news, but we also take advantage of the digital aspect so that, in Paul Harvey's words, the rest of the story can still be found at another location. But if you're not a subscriber with that vehicle, you won't get that information. Now, we also, Jim, don't find that the FCC is going to require, if we were successful with this legislation, there's no requirement for how good that receiver has to be. I don't think we can police that far, but at least keep it in the dash and make it available for the consumer that purchased the vehicle. I mean, when I look at the price of vehicles today, and I respect there's a lot of technology and certainly transportation is important, I can't believe that radio on the dash is that big of a percentage to the bottom line of the value of that car or truck.
Yes,
Well,
we've heard people say these are fractional additional costs in terms of solving any technical problems with AM and electrical vehicles. One of the interesting things was, of course, when the legislation was announced, when Senators Cruz and Markey got together, which of course is for people who follow politics, those two senators are on extreme opposite political spectrum. One is a very liberal Democrat, the other is a very conservative Republican. And the two of them came together and announced that they were doing the AM in Every Vehicle Act. One of the major car manufacturers the very next week said, "Oh, guess what? We have solved the technical problem. We will be keeping AM in our electrical vehicles." So if one manufacturer can solve the problem in a week, then it says very clearly that the problem is one of desire, that these companies don't desire to have AM in their vehicles. It's not a matter of technical problem.
yeah, Jim, that's a story that we've told on Capitol Hill over the course of the last now 2 or 3 years. We went with a broadcaster who had an early Tesla and loved the car and was an old school radio guy and raved about the AM reception on that Tesla. So it could absolutely be done, and I think that's important to note. So, in speaking about the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act, tremendous support in the last Congress. We're well on our way. We have 60 senator co-sponsors, 100 and something in the House. Jim, I'll start with you. What is NABOB and your members doing to support AM for Emma.
Well, needless to say, this is an important issue to my members, and I am very pleased to say that we've been working very closely with the NAB on this issue. I was, I think, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, whenever the AM Vehicle Act was first introduced, I was invited by the NAB to join a panel with them on the same day that they had Senator Markey and Senator Cruz there to talk about it. So we've been working very closely with the NAB and with our individual members of Congress to educate them on the subject. And I feel very good about our prospects going forward. Needless to say, except that Congress is always working on a very limited timetable because they've got to be going out of session again. So we're hoping that we can see something happen before they go out of session again. But it's something that we've been very happy to be so closely involved with the NAB on this.
And Jeff, how are the farm broadcasters engaging with not only lawmakers but also your listeners on the topic?
Well, the quote from the great philosopher Goose from Top Gun, "You never leave your wingman." So we're operating on the wing of the NAB and everyone else who is on their wing. We're making it very clear to our listeners that this information is important. And as we just came off of a 2-week time for legislators to be back in their districts with their constituents, we're asking them to bring that up face to face and continuing to make the point of the value of the product that we provide. Not to say that we're the only source, but we are a source that you depend on. And if you want us to be there, then we need to tell the people involved. Jim, I think you agree, and Jordan as well. The one thing we need in Washington is a vehicle. And there's not too many vehicles or trains that are going to leave the station and land by the end of the calendar year. So we need, whether this fits into budget reconciliation or debt ceiling, or whether this comes somewhere else, we've got to find a way to get this legislation on. And then I would hope there's a good chance that we could see it through. But right now we need a ticket on a train.
Yes, that's true. Needless to say, we're looking at a Congress that is in many ways not very functional. So trying to figure out how on a small number of bills that are likely to get through, how do we make sure we're part of that train? Jeff, you're right. That is the battle before us right now.
I just really, I don't know, maybe this is an attitude, and I got to be careful about not getting on my soapbox. But when you take the ownership of a radio station and you get the license from the FCC, I go back to this public file. Our job is to serve. And it would seem to me that someone who is providing reliable and safe transportation for their customer would want to make sure that they're informed and wouldn't be so, I'll use the word greedy, to make you pay for information that could that could save your life or help your community or grow the business. We're short-sighting this thing in the idea of subscriptions and digital.
You're right, and I think it's the kind of issue that's not going to get public attention for the most part. It's a pretty esoteric issue, and that's why it's important for us to be able to get the congressional support we've gotten thus far, because it's unusual to get the level of support we've gotten for a not very sexy issue. So I feel very good about that. I think that it bodes well for getting to the finish line.
Well, Jeff and Jim, I was going to ask you if you could send one message to Congress or automakers, what would it be? But I think, Jeff, you just said it pretty succinctly just now. So for our listeners, what can they do to help protect AM radio, whether they're broadcasters, policymakers, or just people driving in their car who love AM?
Yeah, I think that the critical thing that, as Jess and I have been talking about, is getting Congress to pass this bill that requires AM in all vehicles. And of course, the second thing to do is if you're going shopping for an electric vehicle, ask the dealer. Am I going to be able to get AM radio in this vehicle when I buy it? And if they say no, walk away. I think that message would resonate with the car companies very quickly. So I think there are things that the individual listener can do to impact this process.
Well, pick up your ink pen, take your keyboard, get your phone, and call your congressman and call your legislator and say, this is important. We're not self-serving here. We are about the business of helping the people that we are licensed to. And when you find the Black radio owners, when you find agriculture, when you find the first responders in the nation behind this piece of legislation, again, I'm not sure of and I'm not promoting Tom Cruise here, but what was the line in the movie that said, "Help me, help you"? Help us continue to help you. And for Pete's sakes, use a little common sense so we can still be there to serve you in time of need, and also talk about your kids on the radio and explain what's happening in politics in your area, and let you hear the local Baptist church or whatever church is on the radio, and then listen to hip hop going home. How about that, Jim?
I like it.
I don't know where I would be growing up in that seat of that G900 Moline, listening to John Records Landecker on WLS out of Chicago at night, or listening to Cincinnati Reds baseball, or those other things that are icons for America. Why would you take that away?
Very well said, Jeff and Jim. Thank you so much for joining us today on our second episode ever of Broadcast Advocate. If you're watching or listening, please be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. To learn more about the National Alliance of State Broadcasting Associations, visit our website, nasbaonline.net.